physical and chemical environment. The next concept are producers, consumers, and primary productivity. So why should we worry about these things? Well, because as consumers, we depend on immense numbers of producers. It's not just a few, it's immense numbers. In order to make our food, that's just a tiny part of it. Food and clothing and shelter, those are a tiny part of what we get from this immense number of producers. They also recycle waste. The natural world recycles waste. Fungi break things down, and if things didn't decompose, then they would build up, and we'd just be full of dead trees and so forth, not breaking down. And it's only been in the last 100 years or so that people have recognized, and really in the last 20 years where it's been widely recognized, that plants have an enormous effect on regulating the composition of our atmosphere. And we'll talk about this semester. And also climate, where carbon dioxide has a big effect on climate, as do other compounds. And we'll talk about those. And plants, again, have a big part in regulating the climate by regulating the composition of the atmosphere. So producers are, if you look through this list, they're definitely B. In ecology, producers are plants, algae, and other autotrophs. An autotroph means self-food. So these are organisms that can produce their own food. Mostly we'll be talking about plants and algae and things that photosynthesize. But there are also organisms like in deep sea vents where they don't depend on the sun and they're able to create their own food, like from sulfur compounds and other things. So there are a few other organisms that rely on other methods, but mostly we'll be talking about producers that photosynthesize and are dependent on the sun for their energy. So producers are primarily plants, also phytoplankton. Phytoplankton is a huge part of the plant kingdom, algae, and some bacteria that use photosynthesis to make their own food. Not all bacteria can photosynthesize. Cyanobacteria also photosynthesize. Okay, so true or false? Do ecosystems generally have more consumers than producers? Or is it the other way around, where they have more producers than consumers? So if they think about it a moment, you of course have to have more producers than consumers, or you would run out of plants. So plants are essentially what the producers are, and vegetarians and carnivores are both dependent on those producers. So this statement is false. Here we see a pyramid showing the different trophic levels. So at the very bottom we have algae. Let's say that we have 10,000 calories of algae. That can produce 1,000 calories of primary consumers. Primary consumers are vegetarian. They eat the primary producers. Then secondary consumers are carnivores, and they eat the crustaceans and insects. And finally, man eats fish. So 1,000 calories of the producers could produce 1,000 calories for primary consumers, can produce 100 calories for fish, and 100 calories of fish can produce 10 calories for people. So it goes down really fast. You need a lot of primary producers to run this whole system. So the green is the primary producers, and then the rest are consumers. And we need 1,000 times more producers than tertiary consumers like men, or like humans, in order to keep the system going. Here's another diagram which just shows that you would need that 2,200 pounds, that's over a ton of corn, can be used to produce 225 pounds of pig, which can be used to produce 22 pounds of human flesh. So if the man eats a pig, he'll only get 22 pounds from the pig. But if man takes the place of the pig, we eliminate the pig and put the man there instead, then 2,200 pounds of corn could produce 225 pounds of man instead. So there's the two levels of consumers. It's less efficient than if you eat the corn directly.